Imagine the ocean on a night so silent that you can hear your own heartbeat echo against the horizon. A lantern swings on the deck of a wooden ship, its flame trembling against the wind. And then, without warning, darkness swallows everything. The ship vanishes. No message. No return. Only whispers left behind. This is the story of ships that never came home. They called the sea the endless road. Sailors, merchants, and dreamers believed that across its silver-blue waters, treasures waited, new lands sparkled, and destiny could be found. Yet for every proud vessel that returned with sails heavy from the wind of fortune, there were others that vanished into silence. No survivors. No wreckage. Only questions left floating on the tide. In the history of oceans, these disappearances became stories, half truth, half mystery. They were told in taverns, whispered at harbors, and carried on the lips of mothers whose sons never walked back through the door. They became a boring history to some, but behind every boring fact, there is a human ache. Behind every vanished ship, there are faces, names, voices that once laughed under the same sun. Tonight, as you drift into rest, we return to those waters. We follow the trails of ships that never returned, their sails dissolving into fog, their wooden frames groaning against the deep. It is not a tale of monsters or pirates, but of time itself, time swallowing human ambition and leaving only fragments for us to remember. The first ship we must speak of is not one with golden sails or grand legends. It was simple. A merchant vessel. It carried wool, grain, and olive oil. Its name has been washed away, but a record from a coastal ledger in the 12th century whispers of its departure. A crew of 20. A captain known for his steady hands. They left in calm weather, guided by stars they trusted like old friends. And then, nothing. Weeks passed. The market that waited for its goods never received them. Families stood at the harbor, counting days like coins falling into the sea. The town wrote the loss into their records, a line of ink that dismissed 20 lives in a single breath. No story. No closure. Just absence. To history, it was dull. To the mothers, the wives, the children, it was everything. And so, a pattern began. The sea kept secrets better than any kingdom. A storm could rise without warning. A plank could split at the wrong hour. A compass could betray its promise. And in those moments, a ship would cross into the realm of memory, no longer belonging to the living world. But not all disappearances were so plain. Some were wrapped in shadows of mystery. There was the case of the Silent Swan, a ship said to have vanished in the early 1500s. It left Lisbon with a crew of 80, heading toward the spice markets of India. Letters from the crew promised wealth and safe winds. Yet after months of silence, another vessel returned with strange news. They had seen the Silent Swan once, far off on the horizon. Its sails were ragged. Its deck looked deserted. They waved. They shouted. No one answered. And before the sun dipped below the ocean, the ship turned into fog and was gone. Did the sailors abandon it? Did fever claim them all? Did pirates seize the treasure and leave the wood adrift? No one knew. The name slipped into history, like chalk washed from a board. Sailors of the time believed the sea was alive. They said it had moods, tempers, even grudges. For every safe passage, it demanded a price. Some said the ships that vanished were offerings the ocean kept for itself. A grim balance. A quiet tax. And so, every time a vessel sailed out of sight, families prayed with trembling lips. But history itself, in its slow, gentle way, kept writing. Ship after ship, name after name, journey after journey. The sea claimed them, and the ink of record keepers noted them as if they were nothing but faint shadows. Yet to us, centuries later, these shadows are everything. They remind us how fragile life was, how little control people had, and how vast the ocean seemed. And if you listen closely, you may still hear it. The groan of wooden beams, the slap of ropes in the wind, the cry of gulls searching for food above an empty deck. Ships that never returned leave behind not just history, but echoes. Echoes that travel across centuries, reaching even this quiet night where you now listen. So, let us follow them, one by one. Each ship, a fragment of history. Each journey, a thread in the great tapestry of the forgotten sea. Not all ships vanished in storms or silence. Some disappeared in ways that stretched the imagination, weaving themselves into legends that still linger along coastlines. Each of these stories may seem small, almost unremarkable, but when stitched together, they form a haunting quilt of unanswered questions. Take, for example, the Crescent Star. She was not the largest ship of her century, but her sails were said to shine white against the night sky, glowing whenever the moon touched them. In the spring of 1609, she departed from Venice with barrels of glass, fine silks, and spices carefully packed for trade in Alexandria. The harbor was filled with well-wishers. Families waved handkerchiefs, children shouted the captain's name, and merchants counted the profits that would soon return to their hands. For weeks, reports came of her steady progress. She stopped in Crete, exchanged goods, and left with favorable winds. Then, silence. The sea held her, and no message ever came back. But the mystery of the crescent star is what happened months later. A fisherman, sailing near Cyprus, claimed he saw her drifting in twilight. Her sails were torn, her mast leaning, but the ship was eerily quiet. He approached, calling out. No answer. When he came closer, fog swallowed her, and she dissolved as though she had never been there. The fisherman swore to the tale until his final breath. Skeptics dismissed it. They said he mistook a shadow or dreamed it under exhaustion. Yet others, especially the wives of the lost sailors, clung to the story. For them, it meant their loved ones had not disappeared without trace. Somewhere, the ship still wandered. Somewhere, their faces might still exist, if only as ghosts. Another tale belongs to the northern seas, colder and crueler than the gentle Mediterranean. There, a ship called the Havon left Bergen in the early 1700s. She carried timber and salted fish, her hull strong enough to endure icy waters. The crew was hardened, men who knew the taste of frost on their lips and the weight of darkness that comes with endless winter nights. Yet even hardened men could not withstand what happened. After 2 weeks at sea, she never reached her destination. Other ships later spoke of hearing strange signals, bells in the fog, faint cries across the water, but when they tried to locate her, there was nothing but rolling mist. Decades later, fragments of the Havons would wash ashore in Denmark, carved with strange marks. Some believed they were runes, though no one could translate them. Others said the sea itself had scored them, as if trying to write its own language upon the wood. Whatever the truth, the ship and her men were never found. You may wonder, why dwell on these vanishings? Why linger on absences? The answer is simple, because history is not only about empires, kings, and battles. It is about the unnamed, the forgotten, the ones whose stories dissolve before reaching the page. Every missing ship is a reminder that life is not just built on victories, but also on mysteries we cannot solve. Let us move further west, to the waters of the Atlantic. In 1748, the Marigold set sail from Portsmouth, England. She was a sturdy frigate, built to withstand both trade and conflict. Her mission was clear, to deliver supplies and correspondence to colonies across the ocean. For a while, she made steady progress. Then, off the coast of Madeira, another vessel claimed they saw her behaving strangely. Her sails were full, but she did not move as though the wind guided her. She drifted in circles, aimless. No one appeared on deck. Lanterns hung still, though it was not yet night. The observer ship signaled, but the Marigold gave no reply. And then, with sudden force, she turned and sped away, vanishing into a horizon clouded by storm. She was never seen again. Some speculated mutiny, others disease, but the strange sighting left an eerie impression. How could a ship move with sails filled, but crew absent? Was it an illusion of distance? Or had the sea claimed her crew before she could return home? There is one final account for this chapter, one less known but perhaps the most human. In the summer of 1822, a small vessel named the Lantern Child left Marseille with only 12 men aboard. She was not meant for glory. She carried wine and pottery, simple cargo for coastal trade. But her story survived because of a diary. Weeks after she disappeared, a fisherman found a leather-bound book washed ashore in Sardinia. Its pages were soaked, but enough survived to tell fragments of the journey. The handwriting belonged to a young sailor named Jules. His words were calm at first, descriptions of sunrises, the laughter of shipmates, the way the sea smelled of salt and freedom. Then, as days passed, his notes grew stranger. He described fog rolling in without warning. He wrote of a lantern that swung even when the air was still. On his final entry, the ink was shaky. The water is not water tonight. It watches. That was the last line. The book ended there. The Lantern Child was never found. Are these stories truth, or are they softened legends shaped by grief? It is difficult to know. But perhaps that is the point. When ships never returned, the people left behind had to invent something to hold on to. They created mysteries because silence was too heavy to bear. And so, history preserved not only facts, but feelings, the ache of waiting, the desperate hope that perhaps the missing were not gone, only misplaced in some other world. By the time the 15th and 16th centuries arrived, the ocean was no longer just a border. It became a frontier. Empires rose with sails, and the sea turned into the stage for ambition. Ships no longer carried only grain or pottery. They carried explorers, soldiers, priests, and dreams of entire nations. And with that expansion came disappearances larger and stranger than before. One such story belongs to the early days of transatlantic voyages. In 1498, a small fleet left Spain under the shadow of Columbus's discoveries. Among them was a modest ship named La Esperanza, the Hope. Her mission was to follow the newly charted routes, to seek the riches of unknown lands. For weeks, she was spotted alongside other ships in the fleet. Then, in mid-ocean, her presence thinned. Some reported she lagged behind, her sails sluggish, her mast creaking as though tired. Others claimed her captain quarreled with the admiral and veered southward. Whatever the reason, one dawn she was gone. No splinters, no smoke, no trace of battle. Just gone. The other ships pressed onward. History barely noticed. La Esperanza was reduced to a footnote in a logbook, lost. Yet her crew had names. They had songs they sang on deck, prayers whispered under stars, faces waiting at home. And they became, like so many others, absorbed by the Atlantic's silence. As centuries passed, ships grew larger, more confident. The age of sail reached its golden crest. Yet even the proudest ships could disappear. Take the case of the Sea Lion, an English galleon of the early 1600s. She was armed with cannons, strong oak beams, and the finest navigators of her age. She was not supposed to be fragile. She carried both soldiers and scholars, heading toward the Caribbean with maps, instruments, and royal orders. And yet, she never reached land. Another ship in her company later swore they saw the Sea Lion one morning, her sails straining hard against a furious wind. But there was no storm, not for them. The sky was pale, the waters calm, yet the Sea Lion heaved as though trapped in a tempest invisible to all others. The witness wrote in his journal, "It was as if she sailed against a storm none of us could feel. Then, she turned, and was gone, as though swallowed by a wall of air." The journal still exists in a London archive. Scholars call it exaggeration. But what sailor writes of invisible storms unless he truly believed he saw them? Perhaps the most haunting tale of this period is the Santiago. She was Portuguese, a noble carrack, built to span oceans with vast cargoes of gold and spice. In 1526, she left Lisbon on what should have been a profitable voyage to Africa. Her departure was celebrated, cannons fired, banners waved, and crowds cheered. Then the sea erased her. No sighting, no rumor, no fragment washed ashore. Entirely gone. What makes her story remarkable is the silence that followed. Normally, when a great ship was lost, survivors would eventually trickle back, castaways found on remote islands, sailors drifting in lifeboats. But not for the Santiago. Her absence was total. To this day, no one has found even her remains. Portuguese poets later wrote verses about her, suggesting she had sailed into the edge of the world. Some imagined she was pulled beneath by sea gods jealous of human ambition. Others whispered she found a hidden land, one never charted, where her crew built a life far from home. Truth or fantasy, her disappearance became myth. It was not only warships or trading vessels that vanished. Exploration itself demanded a price. When men sought to map the poles, to reach places untouched by human eyes, the ocean demanded its toll. In 1845, long after the age of sails had matured, Sir John Franklin led two ships, the Erebus and Terror, toward the Arctic, searching for the Northwest Passage. Though their names survive in history, what happened to them echoes the same silence as those that came before. Months passed, then years. No return. Families grew anxious, governments sent search parties, explorers combed the ice. Slowly, fragments appeared, a spoon here, a torn piece of cloth there, skeletons curled against the frozen stone. The ships themselves were gone, claimed by ice and sea. For decades, their fate haunted the imagination of Europe. They had vanished into the Arctic's endless white, where silence speaks louder than sound. It was not until the 21st century that wrecks were finally found, preserved in icy graves. Yet for those who waited in Franklin's own time, it did not matter. To them, the ships had become just another pair that never returned. Stories like these remind us that disappearance is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a quiet vanishing. The sea does not roar or crash, it simply erases. A ship sails into fog, into storm, into distance, and never reappears. The ocean closes behind it, leaving no scar. Imagine the harbor on such days. Families gathered at the docks, scanning the horizon, waiting for sails that never came. Merchants frowning at empty ledgers. Children asking, "When will father return?" And no one able to answer. That is where the true weight of history lies, not in the ships themselves, but in the human silence that followed. When we speak of boring history, it is often because we read dates, names, and places without faces. But if you slow down, you hear it differently. You hear the creak of ropes, the slosh of waves against wood, the laughter of men sharing bread under starlight, and then the sudden hush when all of it stops. Ships that never returned are more than just forgotten journeys. They are reminders of how fragile human ambition is when set against the endless blue. For every ship that brought back wealth, glory, or discovery, there were others erased without a trace. Their absence humbles us. It tells us that no matter how strong we build, no matter how carefully we plan, the sea will always have the final word. By the 19th century, the ocean had changed. No longer did sails alone guide ships across the horizon. Steam engines roared, iron hulls cut through the waves, and nations believed they had finally tamed the sea. But for all the confidence of industry, the ocean's answer remained the same. It swallowed ships as easily as it had swallowed wooden caravels centuries before. One of the earliest mysteries of the steam age was the SS Waratah. She left Durban, South Africa, in July 1909, carrying nearly 200 souls on her way back to England. She was new, grand, and considered unsinkable by many. Merchants trusted her, families boarded her with children in tow, and her captain carried himself with pride. But just 2 days after leaving port, she vanished. Another vessel, the Clan McIntyre, had spotted her one last time on the open ocean. They exchanged greetings, their whistles echoing in the night. Then, when morning came, the Waratah was nowhere to be seen. Not a single passenger, not a splinter of wreckage, not even a lifeboat was ever recovered. For over a century, divers and historians have searched for her remains. Some believe she was caught in a sudden storm and overturned. Others whisper that her design was flawed, that she was top-heavy and tipped into the deep. Yet others suggest something stranger, that she lies somewhere far out of reach, untouched, a ghost ship of the industrial age. Whatever the truth, the Waratah became the Titanic before the Titanic, her name etched into the sorrow of the sea. But hers was not the only story. The Atlantic in the 1800s was crowded with ships that carried not only goods but entire communities of migrants, people chasing the promise of a new world. They sold everything, boarded great liners, and trusted the ocean to deliver them to new shores. Not all of them made it. In 1854, the city of Glasgow, a passenger steamer, left Liverpool with over 450 people aboard. She was bound for Philadelphia, carrying men, women, and children eager for a fresh beginning. But she never arrived. Weeks passed. Families waited on the docks of Philadelphia, hearts leaping at every rumor of sails on the horizon. Letters were written back to Britain asking for news. None came. To this day, no one knows what became of her. Some believe she sank in a mid-ocean storm. Others think her boilers exploded, sending her down in minutes. A few speculated she drifted far north, into icy waters, and was crushed by icebergs. But without wreckage, her fate remains sealed in silence. Hundreds of lives, erased into the Atlantic's cold embrace. Then there was the SS Arctic. She was a proud American ship, part of the Collins Line, famous for her speed and elegance. In September 1854, she collided with a smaller vessel, the Vesta, off the coast of Newfoundland. At first, it seemed she might survive. But within hours, the damage spread, and she began to sink. What made her tragedy infamous was not just the loss, but the failure of human decency. Lifeboats were few, and instead of women and children being saved first, crew members and stronger men fought for places. Of her nearly 400 passengers, only 85 survived, and none of them were women or children. The story shocked the world. The ocean had claimed yet another vessel, but this time, it was not only waves that swallowed lives, it was human fear, selfishness, and chaos. The Arctic never returned, and her wreck remains undiscovered, resting somewhere in the cold Atlantic. By the early 1900s, technology had advanced even further. Ships were floating palaces, with chandeliers, ballrooms, and dining halls that rivaled the finest hotels. Yet the ocean still watched, patient and unchanging. The most famous example, of course, is the Titanic. Her name alone carries weight, the unsinkable ship that proved otherwise. But though her tragedy is well known, she belongs to this same lineage of stories. A ship that left full of hope and never returned. More than 1,500 souls perished in the icy Atlantic night, their dreams extinguished with the flicker of lanterns against lifeboats. Yet the Titanic is remembered precisely because she was found. Her wreck rests 2 miles below the ocean's surface, documented in photographs and film. But countless other ships from her era share her fate, only without discovery, without memorials. They remain names in dusty registers, known only to those who research, whispered only by the sea. One such ship was the SS Valencia. In 1906, she ran into storms along the Pacific coast of Canada. Unable to find safe passage, she struck a reef. The ship clung there, battered by waves, as passengers screamed for help. Rescuers tried, but the weather was merciless. For days, survivors clung to the wreck until the sea finally tore it apart. Out of nearly 180 people, only 37 lived. Local fishermen later swore they saw her ghost. A phantom ship, black against the horizon, drifting silently, before fading into mist. For them, the Valencia did not simply sink. She lingered, restless, replaying her agony for anyone willing to see. What do these stories teach us? Perhaps that progress does not erase mystery. Wooden ships or iron giants, humble traders or majestic liners, the sea treats them the same. It accepts them when it chooses, holds them in silence, and sometimes, it even returns fragments as reminders. Think of the families who waited at harbors in the age of steam. Instead of telegrams bringing joy, they received none at all. Instead of whistles of return, only silence. Mothers in Liverpool, fathers in New York, children in Cape Town, all left with empty doors. And so, whether it was a wooden carrack in the 1500s or a steel steamer in the 1900s, the story was always the same, ships that never returned. By the mid-20th century, one might think the ocean had surrendered its mysteries. Technology had advanced, radios crackled across great distances, and steel leviathans crossed waters with the confidence of empires. Yet, even in the modern age, The sea reminded humanity that it does not forget its old ways. Ships continued to vanish. Some quietly, some dramatically, and some in ways that no logbook could fully explain. One of the most chilling stories is that of the MV Jurita. In 1955, she set sail from Samoa bound for the Tokelau Islands with 25 people aboard. She was experienced, trusted, and her crew was familiar with the route. 5 weeks later, she was found adrift, 600 miles off course. Her decks were eerily empty. Lifeboats were missing. Food and supplies were still on board. The radio was tuned to distress frequency, but the equipment had been dismantled as if someone had tried desperately to send a message. Yet there were no passengers. No crew. Not a single human soul remained. To this day, no one knows what happened. Did the crew abandon ship after a sudden leak, only to perish at sea? Did panic set in? Or was there something else, a slow unraveling of order until the ocean itself became their grave? The Jurita floats in history as one of the most famous modern ghost ships, a reminder that even steel cannot guarantee certainty. Other tales remain quieter but just as haunting. In 1921, the schooner Carol A. Deering ran aground in North Carolina. When rescuers boarded her, they found a ship perfectly intact, meals half-eaten, ropes dangling, logbooks gone. But her crew, every single one, was missing. Theories spread quickly. Some blamed pirates. Others thought mutiny. Some whispered of supernatural intervention. Yet the truth is locked in silence. Like so many before, the Carol A. Deering became just another ship that never truly returned. And then, there are the stories of ships that vanish not into silence, but into legend. The most famous of these, of course, is the Flying Dutchman. Though more myth than fact, countless sailors from the 17th century onward swore they saw her, an eternal ship, glowing faintly, cursed to wander oceans forever. To some, she was a bad omen, foretelling storms. To others, she was simply the ocean's way of keeping one of its prizes forever visible but never touchable. Whether real or imagined, the Flying Dutchman became a symbol for every vessel that vanished. She is the eternal metaphor, a ship that never returns, trapped between history and memory. Today, satellites map the seas. GPS can pinpoint any vessel in real time. And yet, accidents still occur. Fishing boats vanish in storms, cargo ships sink in sudden squalls, yachts drift into nowhere. Families still wait at harbors, hoping for news that sometimes never comes. The numbers are fewer now, but the silence remains just as heavy when it arrives. Because the ocean, for all our progress, is still larger than we are. It does not yield all its answers. It holds them in its depths, deep canyons darker than outer space, trenches that no human eye has ever seen. Somewhere down there lie the remains of the Wairarta, the city of Glasgow, the La Esperanza, and countless others. They sleep in the quiet, beyond light, beyond touch. And so, the story of ships that never returned is not just a record of vanishings. It is a meditation on human fragility, on our longing to travel, to seek, to cross horizons. Every time a ship left port, there was a risk it would never return. And yet, people kept sailing. They still do. Because the call of the horizon is stronger than the fear of the unknown. Perhaps that is why these stories soothe us even as they unsettle us. They remind us that not everything must be explained. Some mysteries can rest, like the sea itself, vast and unbroken. Imagine, for a moment, standing on a quiet shore at night. The tide rolls in and out, whispering against the sand. Far out, the horizon glows faintly under the moon. If you close your eyes, you might almost hear it, the creak of a mast, the snap of canvas in the wind, the call of a sailor who will never arrive. These are the echoes of ships that never returned. They are not horror, not tragedy alone, but a soft reminder. Life is fragile, journeys are uncertain, and history is not just about what is recorded. It is also about what is missing. So tonight, as you rest, let the sea's stories wash over you. Let them drift, like lanterns across water, glowing softly until they fade into mist. For the ships may never return, but their whispers linger forever.